Okay, so we are here for another episode of CXC Leaders You Should Know. And I'd like to introduce everyone to Ash Turner, who is the Senior Customer Success Manager at Zendesk. Ash, tell the people a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me today. Like she said, my name is Ash Turner. I'm a customer success manager at Zendesk, and my career has been such a fascinating one in CX. So I actually started my roots were in nonprofit. I originally started there as a volunteer, and I worked a lot of thankless jobs in my early 20s. But at the time, I started volunteering for a crisis hotline, and then eventually turned into they invited me to join their paid staff. And I really think that was like such a fundamental introduction for me to get to CX, right? Like you can deal with an angry customer if you're able to help them navigate acute crisis, right?
Right.
It really puts into perspective like what really constitutes an emergency. Volunteering in the emergency room has also really taught me that too, and really like had me reframe that. But yeah, that's kind of where my career started. That's really where I got a solid handle on like contact center metrics and all of those kind of things. Is just like how does albeit not the support organizations that we often talk about, but still a support organization and managing all those different channels. And then after a while, I did that for a while there, but I was looking to do something a little bit more and have a larger impact while I was there. So after I was, starting to kind of, burn out from hotline based work, just because it's some of the most rewarding work I've done in my career. It's also just, it takes a lot on you day in and day out. I moved into development and operations. So, there I got really comfortable with our Salesforce instance. I really got excited about scaling a lot of our engagement programs. They're a lot of grassroots donors, but the hotline didn't necessarily have the ability to engage with each of them one-on-one. So really building out some of those scaled processes through our Salesforce is really one of the things that got me really excited about just like scaling processes and program management, but also like really got me excited about tech, because so much of tech we're using these CRMs, right? I was unfortunately a victim of the layoffs in 2020, and COVID happened. It was not fun at the time, but I knew I needed to pivot. So I started to kind of just broaden. I'm like, okay, well, what else have I done? And found myself interviewing for tech jobs. And so along came a company, classy.org. They've since been acquired by GoFundMe, but I was really able to kind of bridge the fact that I had done all of that nonprofit experience, understood how the programs worked, understood how the development worked, and was really able to kind of pitch myself as like, look, like I don't know the technology. Like I still have room to develop as a software professional per se, but I can talk to your clients, and if I hop on a support call, I understand what they're going through because I lived that pain, right? And so that was really such an essential skill for me to like draw on my past experience that wasn't in tech to breaking into that first tech job by aligning what I did. And while I was at Classy, I was in customer support. I did renewals management for a while. I ended my time there as an enterprise account specialist and doing technical account management. And all of those experiences at Classy really poised me well to join the customer success team at Zendesk. I work on a really awesome part of the success team called our scaled customer success team. So we have to often really think about how do we deliver programs for success at scale. So it's part, client relations for sure, but also I also have to think as a program manager and think about like how are the processes that I'm doing? How can I scale and repeat things? And so it's definitely a different angle than CX customer success is still ultimately it's part of the customer experience for sure. And I also get to have a lot of really fun conversations with my clients day in and day out about how they're running their support organizations. And so really excited to be here today. A little bit about Zendesk. We're a customer experience software provider. We power billions of customer interactions around the world. We actually are sitting on, at Zendesk, we sit on the largest database of all customer interactions, which is a really neat thing. So I'm really excited to dive in, talk a little bit about some of the trends that we're seeing in the industry, how I've kind of navigated my own customer experience career, both in support and success, and just have fun riffing with you today, Ty. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. I always say Zendesk is the CRM that we work with most at CXC. We are a partner. And when people ask about what is Zendesk exactly, I'm like, well, Zendesk is to customer experience what Salesforce is to sales. It is that pivotal product that you will probably need as you're trying to grow. So it's cool that you work on the scale team because I love to talk about scaling for sure. So
100%.
we got to dig into it. We got to go. Hot topic right now for sure is AI. I want to talk about some topics. I want to talk about some trends that you're seeing in the CX space with the companies that you are working with. What are people saying about AI and how is Zendesk responding to that?
I mean, AI is having a moment right now. I think this isn't really a huge secret for a lot of us who have been following the tech buzz for a while. And, we know that AI experiences are starting to become so much more seamless. We know from our research, we do an annual report every year, CX trends, and we know that 65% of leaders say that AI and bot performance has really increased significantly in the last year, and that consumers really want these bots to have this human-like service. The problem we see with like ChatGPT, right, is that ChatGPT is able to really confidently give you a wrong answer, right? So we're not really seeing that ChatGPT and AI is taking this role of necessarily doing our agents' jobs for us. Like our jobs are safe, right? But really where we're seeing AI and where I'm really seeing our CX champions really lead the pack with artificial intelligence is they're learning how to harness it as almost like a personal assistant for an agent, right? Like we can't, give every customer support agent their own executive assistant, but we can give them AI. And that's really where I'm seeing a lot of exciting things happen in this space. We actually just announced at Zendesk, we just launched a couple days ago, we announced our collaboration with OpenAI. So definitely exciting things that are coming on the precipice of that. And it's really exciting to be at a leading customer experience organization who's really looking to really be thoughtful about the AI experiences that we're delivering to really help agents do their best work. Because if we have happy agents, then that leads to happy customers.
So true. And your perspective on AI, so the last 2 episodes that my team did internally, we talked about AI and whether or not that's going to replace the role of the customer service person. And our sentiments are nearly identical. So I love to get confirmed with that because we have our own internal thought processes, but hearing it from someone else just really like seals that, right? What other trends are you seeing in the CX space?
I think one of the big trends we're really seeing nowadays is that consumers more than ever are really defining or desiring these conversational experiences, right? Support isn't just transactional anymore. It's conversational, it's relational. We really want to see that as consumers, right? We really want to see that our brands that we interact with are where we already are. Right. So a lot of the questions that I'm having with brands that are often evolving from legacy processes, particularly in the consumer space, we're often talking about how do you deliver support over your social channels, particularly with my clients in the tech sector. Messaging is a really hot topic right now, as opposed to, a lot of people were very hesitant to launch legacy chat because this idea of, hey, I have to staff this channel and all the pressure and the burden that comes with chat. And really the nice thing about messaging is it really kind of takes that framework, but makes it so asynchronous that we can really have these conversational experiences without necessarily the same pressure and the high stakes that synchronous chat has, because these messaging conversations can be picked up and put down and really seamlessly integrate into your product or your app. So really, really exciting stuff. Other trends we're really seeing, we know that 79% of CX leaders really believe that service data is so important and leveraged for more personalization. My dear friend Jessica Rose Garcia, she was on the panel that you attended.
She'll be here.
Yeah. She talks so much. I'm so glad. I'm looking forward to that episode. But JR, she often talks about how important it is to be so uncompromising with your data and really seeing each of these customer conversations as such golden data to really harness and personalize those customer experiences, not only on just the one-to-one level based on what you learn from previous interactions with your customers to further personalize that experience, but also, again, as we kind of talk about AI, right? One of the things that we're also seeing is that AI can also help really personalize those experiences. So I think it's such an exciting time to be in this industry too. And I think there's also a lot of really important implications around how we harness a lot of this data to really kind of transform our thinking from, being a cost center in CX to really stepping in to the revenue driver that we all know we can be in customer experience, right? So that's, all very exciting stuff that we're seeing in trends these days.
For sure. There are a couple of things that you talked about that I kind of want to just touch on a little bit. The messenger experience being one. We've deployed numerous instances of Zendesk, and the messenger feature and the ability to, as you mentioned, create that conversation has really been a big win for our clients, making sure that we're able to push in the relevant information just in case someone's not available in that real time has been very key, and they love it. So I'm sure you get that kind of feedback all the time, but just sharing that with you so that you know firsthand, I've seen it. The other thing you mentioned was using data. So talk to me about some of the metrics that you find to be the most important in measuring customer success.
Yeah, totally. When I'm often working with my customers, oftentimes one of the first metrics that I look at is self-service ratio, right? It's looking at, when you have content out, how many views is your self-service content getting, and really investing in those self-service materials before they turn into a ticket. A little story. So last weekend, my friend and I, we went out and saw in Southern California, the wildflowers are blooming right now.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. And so went out to an Airbnb out in the desert. It was this little camper. And one of the things that was really, stood out to me in that customer experience as a consumer is that I didn't have to interact with the host at all. The one message that I sent her in the check-in process was only something that was already in her initial message that I just didn't read carefully enough, right?
Okay.
And so I thought that was a really thoughtfully designed experience by that host, is that all of that self-service information, all of that information that I needed to make my stay successful, as well as how to find this place, which was kind of like off the grid, and we needed a weird map to get there. I thought it was just so thoughtfully designed of an experience that I didn't have to talk to anyone, right? Like, I almost feel kind of ironic in saying this, but like when we have to talk to our customers and they're reaching out to us, like in a sort of a way, we've kind of already like let them down, right? Because self-service is such an important investment. And I think is one of the key mistakes that I see a lot of CX leaders, especially when they're first starting out. Like, sure, those customer conversations are really important. They're great gold mines of data. We even see that when we're practicing knowledge-centered service, that really at the top of that whole double loop process is when we search for information, we're creating and capturing that data. We understand like where do we need to go next, and that searching is creating. At the same time, like we also with self-service is so important to really kind of get that right. So I'm often looking at that. I often get asked a lot about customer satisfaction, and a little bit of a hot take, I don't think it's really that great of an indicator for customer experience. Instead, I prefer to look at customer effort score, which I think self-service again really kind of ties back into this, because we know that customer effort score and how easy it is for a customer to get help with their problem is a much more pervasive indicator of a customer's likelihood to either renew their contract or spend more money and expand, and really engage more with your business that way, rather than just necessarily like, oh, like this agent was helpful. And sure, like CSAT is still a really important operational metric for sure, but not really a great indicator of like how the health of your business is performing.
We literally just talked about CSAT as well, and that CSAT is designed to be a measurement of that interaction with the customer, or with that agent and the customer, I should say. But the reality is that that's not what it is. It's often more so about that customer's experience with getting what they want. And so trying to find a fine line from that is always fun. Something that you touched on, I want to talk about a little bit, which is being an advocate for self-service, which I am, especially when we think about the cost center versus revenue center aspect. Like the more that you can drive down that cost, obviously ideal. What do you say so I'll tell you from my perspective, the companies that we work across, I tend to not go in with an opinion only because I need to understand what is the vision, right? So what is the vision for that leader? And most of the time they want pie in the sky, omni-channel, give me everything, until they see the costs associated with that. And they're like, actually, just give me this. So I always say that we should listen to what the customer tells us that they want and then build around that. So if a customer tells you that they want phones, I'm going to go to the far extreme. What would be your rebuttal for someone who's like, our customers say they want to talk to us on the phone?
It's actually so funny that you say that, because I actually have a customer right now who 80% of their contact volume is phone calls, right?
Okay.
And I find that so interesting in making the case for self-service and deflection with them. And sure, part of that is, they've also trained their customers that like phones are the best way to get a hold of them. But, that's, I think, really kind of where, for me, right, like how I made this kind of transition from being like in customer support, right? Oftentimes in support, like it's very much like this is a tactical issue. We're solving just the issue. One of the things I really love about customer success, and I think you probably practice this a little bit too when you're working with clients too, Ty, is you really have to have some of those kind of more like broader discovery questions to understand like what is the health of the business here. And so oftentimes, a lot of the times when customers kind of come to me with like, this is kind of how we've always done things, or this is where we want, I always like to kind of ask why, which I think it's one of those things that I can get away with a little bit more as a CSM that I couldn't support. When I would try, I always talked, when I was a support rep too, and I was taking tickets, I still had that very kind of like curiosity to me. And I was like, I was trying to think very holistically about the customer. But I think, in those kind of interactions, sometimes it's like, just solve my issue and tell me how to fix it, which is why I think success is a little bit more right for me, just because I'm a naturally curious person. So I think kind of circling back to your main question, I guess for me, it's like, okay, well, why do they want phones? Like, where is the conversation mattering? And I think with phones in particular, right, we know that that's the most costly channel to deliver customer service on. It also, when we're looking at messaging and email, right, you're doing text-based communication. An agent can handle multiple different text-based communications at once. Whereas with phone, you're only having one conversation. You can't switch between the two. So it really is a barrier. I think more and more we are moving towards text-based communication, but I also, and again, I think this is such an individualized conversation for each brand and each company. I think it's, it's not fair to just give like a broad brush statement of like no phones forever. Like there are still going to be times where, I mean, even, we even see it with, Gen Z, right? Sometimes they still just want to pick up the phone and, get someone to talk to with your problem, because sometimes that's the best way to solve an issue. So it's still really important to just kind of consider the role that it plays in your larger omnichannel strategy. I guess the one thing I wouldn't advocate for is like only phone-based support, right? You need to have those other self-service and text-based channels to allow for efficient handling of the questions and to make sure that people are getting the help they need. I think about that when I was in crisis services. One of the things that was really unique about our model is we never put our callers, I was about to say customers, but we never put our callers on hold, right? Like if we weren't available to take a crisis call, like we would have a prompt to involve them to call back. So they just weren't sitting on hold, for eternity, right? And so that's also some of the things, I draw on that experience a lot, especially when I have these phone conversations. It's, I never really thought that like taking crisis calls and like, that would help me out in my career and customer experience. But I really find myself drawing on that experience so much when I navigate telephony conversations with my customers, for sure.
I mean, what can't you handle if you can handle that? That's up there with handling 911 emergency calls. Like it's literally life or death, right? So as you've got phone experience, I found that phone experience is not a big thing these days. We're seeing that people are using phones as a differentiator for how they're trying to set themselves apart, to be like, hey, you can actually get a person on the phone. I do think that some people are overdoing it, just my opinion, meaning that like I've had conversations on the phone because I might be Gen Z. I don't know what I am, but I think I kind of started working at a point in time where I learned some very old school, processes, but then still young enough to kind of adapt, I guess. But they overdo the conversational piece on the phone to the point where like I picked up the phone to call you because I need you to take care of this. I don't really want to sit on the phone for too long, but that's just me. So I do see things being cyclical, coming in, coming out, changing. No problem there. So I love your perspective on that. Question: let's talk about the differences between some of the nomenclature that we live within our world. How do you see the difference between customer success and your role specific? I'm sorry, you are customer success.
I am customer success.
Yeah,
yes.
that's my bad. So success and support. So sorry, success and support. How do you see the difference?
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, really success, oftentimes we're a lot more proactive And I think we often are very holistic. Oftentimes, at a lot of SaaS companies, success is often tied to the revenue metric of gross revenue retention or net revenue retention. So really making sure that at the end of the day, right, we're, if we start with, $100,000, that's a really small amount of ARR, but we start with $100,000 of ARR, even if, we have a little bit of churn and contraction, maybe the expansion kind of rolls it back up, that we're really still making sure that we're keeping the overall business in a healthy place, right? And I think in customer success, more so than support, you really have to walk this line of making sure you're doing, being a good steward, not only of the customer and making sure they're deriving value and reaching their goals, but in doing so, you're also being a good steward of the business and the revenue. So you kind of have to walk that line. Whereas in my experience in support was often very tactical. It was very issue based. It's often very reactive. So customers are usually reaching out to support. Whereas conversely, as a customer success manager within my portfolio of clients, and sure, sometimes, they know how to get a hold of me. So I often sometimes will get emails from customers, and sometimes my job, I do have to do a little bit of reactivity. It is part of the job. But by nature, success is much more of a proactive mindset. And I think even still, even if you're not in the world of business to business SaaS, right? I think all businesses can really kind of think about this customer success mindset of how are we proactively reaching out to our customers just in time. One of the things that we use at Zendesk is we use these triggers to tell us essentially when is the right time to fire on a client and engage with a client. And that's really so important for our scalability, because we know when customers reach specific life cycle moments, we know that we can then trigger out. We have a really great Gainsight team is the software we use for customer success. We have a really great and talented team, but really kind of will build out these triggers, right? Of let's say a customer hasn't logged in for, X amount of time, or seat utilization has recently dropped, or, we'll have webhooks in the product to indicate hey, maybe help centers are having less views than they should, or, a customer hasn't set up any triggers yet, right? So these kinds of things will have these triggers that essentially can kind of push out hey, here's this just-in-time notification, which allows us to then go and intervene at the right time and to be able to have those conversations at the right moment. So that's so important for scale. And one of the things that I also really kind of enjoy about that, and, I think at the beginning of this, I said, I'm part customer relations, but I also have to really think in the world of scaled success. I often have to think as a program manager, right? So one of the big things that we have with our customers who have been customers of Zendesk for eons, right, is we have some customers on a legacy user interface. So, how do we get customers to this milestone of moving on to what new customers receive out of the box today, our agent workspace? How do we guide customers along that migration pathway? So, that's just one example. That's a play that, we'll use a lot of plays as well too, to really kind of define very operationally, what are the steps, what are the inputs that we're putting into our interventions, ensuring we have those inputs, all the data, and then at the end of it, what are the outputs and the operationalized key behaviors that we've built, as well as all the resources to help kind of guide that engagement. And some of these plays, some of them are definitely human assisted plays, but some of the plays that we've deployed are also digital plays too. And we're really using automation to really kind of make sure that customers are being nurtured in the right ways at the right times. And so, especially for, thinking about, founders, right, who might not necessarily have a dedicated support and success department yet, I think it's really important to both practice that hey, you can get a hold of me when you need me mindset and be able to be reactive when you need to be reactive. But especially when you're scaling and just starting out, I think it's also really important to think ahead and okay, what are these proactive indicators that indicate that a customer might need help? In the donor relations world, right, when we're managing donation revenue, the other analogy that I often use is we would also look at the data too to see when was a donor's last gift, and really kind of time our outreach and our automation around making sure that they get a reminder to renew their gift at certain touch points. So if we've realized, hey, their last gift was 11 months ago, let's maybe see if this is a good time for that annual donation, setting up some of those automated triggers and nurture tracks to really make sure that we are thinking holistically about kind of what is that next step in the touch point journey. So
Then, okay, I have a question. Understanding success versus support. What are the differences that you see between customer experience and customer service?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think with customer experience, the way that I always have kind of conceptualized it, right, is customer experience is the umbrella, right?
Mhm.
And under customer experience, we have so many different things, right? We have, marketing plays a role in customer experience,
Yes.
product plays a role in customer experience, service plays a role in experience, and so does success. So I really kind of see it as this kind of whole umbrella of different teams and activities working towards the same goal. But also on top of that, too, I think the idea of customer success and being both good stewards of the customers and ensuring they're receiving value while also ensuring that the business is also in a healthy spot, too, and that we're being good stewards of our teams for sure.
Yep.
That's not just one team's job. Like, yes, there is a team at a lot of companies called customer success, but
Yep.
customer success isn't just their job. So I think also too, customer success and customer experience are so interlinked in ways, because when a whole company really adopts that mindset of ensuring that customers stay sticky, I got all my stickers here. I like sticky, right?
I love it.
But yeah, when we really think about how do we ensure that our customers stay sticky, and really nurture them for success, I see all of these concepts as so intermingled, right? Like none of these things live in silos. And I think that's also just really important to think about, as you're starting to grow your business, right? You might have been a startup, but now you're starting to grow, you're starting to have these different departments. I think it's really important that, while sure, functional leaders and functional experts and SMEs are going to do what they do best, really being thoughtful about not having those silos, because where I see a lot of problems run into, especially with my customers who, didn't really think about scale,
Yep.
oftentimes, we'll be working on an initiative, but it's like, oh, but we need to work with this other team who works in this other silo. And part of my challenge too, with kind of sometimes guiding my customers through change management, is okay, how do we break down these silos internally?
Yeah.
Which I think sometimes, especially, and you probably can appreciate this too, Ty, when you're coming in as an external expert, you sometimes can kind of put that motivation to kind of help, drive meaningful change in the way that your points of contact internally can't drive themselves. And I think that's one of the things that really is special about being leveraged as an external expert, is that you can really kind of make some of those suggestions or point out those, I don't want to say holes, but kind of point out those holes and where some of those silos exist, really with, this idea of how are we stewarding, because right, I don't just have to think about my customer, but specifically being a CSM in the customer experience space, I'm also solving for my customer's customer, which is also especially impactful for me when I get to work with brands that I myself am a customer of, because then it's a real meta moment, because my customer's customer is also me. But yeah.
And then you get to solve for yourself, and you're going to do the best for you. So done and done, right? So there's a conversation that my team and I had literally just yesterday in our end of week wrap up meeting. And we were talking about the types of clients that we love to work with, which are usually funded startups who are going to be a big deal. That's my zhuzh. I get into it. I love it. It's fun. Because they're going to scale, and they're going to scale fast, and it gives me new gray hairs, literally, because it's uncharted territory every time, right? And then there's a company that has been around and is in that scale phase, right? But then there's also the company that's growing. Do you see a difference between a company that is growing and a company that is scaling?
That's a really good question. I don't think they're not mutually exclusive, right? Scaling
Agreed.
and growing often happen coterminously. So I think that's such an interesting question.
Okay, here's how I kind of justified it in my own little world, right?
Sure.
To me, scale looks more like this. And maybe I should do it the opposite way, because it depends on how you look at the screen.
I
But
do that all the time, where I mix up the whole mirror thing. Yeah.
It's growth. I don't mean the opposite direction, but thinking about it in it's almost up. It's steep.
Up
Whereas
right.
growth, it kind of happens over time, right? And so what I found is that the strategies that we implement are best for scale most of the time, because we're thinking about what's going to happen when you double, triple in size. When we try to build there's a setup, we're thinking about what's going to happen when you have to bring on 10 people in because you're doing that great? Like, let's make sure that it's ready for that.
Right.
Versus if you're just growing, usually it'll be, we just want to fix these two things, right? Because we're growing, but we're probably not going to double, we're not going to triple, we're probably going to add 2 people in 2 years or something like that. Am I off with that, or what do you think? Because that's just how I've justified it for myself.
Yeah, no, I think that's such an interesting take on things for sure. I don't know if I could really say it any better myself too, because, again, I sometimes am having these customers, oftentimes a lot of the customers I work with have been established for some time,
Okay.
but are often undergoing digital transformations. And, I think when they don't, sometimes you're growing, but like when you're not growing, like sometimes you're so focused on hyper growth and growth at all costs that you're often taking on, like, I think in the software engineering world, we talk about this idea of technical debt. And I think that's also so true for customer experience operations, right? Like sometimes you're so focused on growing so quickly that you don't realize that you're accumulating all this other debt because you didn't scale your processes to begin with. So I think it's really important to take that mindset. I will say, like, very shameless plug here for sure too. We offer 6 months free of Zendesk to startups who I believe you have to be, I don't know if you have to have your Series A or your Series B. But if you go, I believe it is zendesk.com/startups, or if you just Google Zendesk for startups, we actually will hook you up with 6 months free of Zendesk, which is really awesome. And then you're really in this nurture-based cohort. And our startup team are some of the smartest people that I know at Zendesk. And they really are so excited about working with really innovative startups to really just start thinking scale at the very beginning of their experience and really build out some of those processes so that by the time that they graduate from the program at 6 months, they're then set up for success. And even on top of that, they're often getting Zendesk at a discount from the list price as well too, because they participate in the startups program, and then they continue to stay alumni of the program. And Sam Chandler over at Zendesk, one of the best humans at Zendesk I know, leads a really passionate group of folks on the startup success team to really help guide those customers through those touch points with her team of CSMs on that team, as well as her solution architects. It's also really stewarded well too, and kind of one of the key linchpins of that as well too, is that oftentimes our startups, because we know community is so critical to customer experience and customer success, right? Like my customers don't learn best from me, they learn best from each other. So I'm always thinking about like really thoughtfully like where I can introduce customers to one another. And I think that's one thing that is really special about our startups program, is that we really cultivate that community for our startups. And so, and even not our startup companies too, right? Like even companies who don't necessarily who didn't go through the startups pathway and have been there for, been with us for a while, I'm always thinking about like, how can we meaningfully connect customers to one another to draw on those experiences and really like develop, sure, like Zendesk might be a part of that conversation, but also like, even in this world of automation, right? And automation and technology and AI and like all of these things we're talking about optimizing efficiencies, there really isn't a replacement for human connection, right? We are wired as social beings. And I think that's so important to really foster that sense of community. And that's one of my great joys as a customer success manager, is when I get to, talk to one client and I'm like, oh, like a week ago, I was just talking to, Bob about Y, and now I'm talking to Sheree about X. Like, why don't I get these two people together to learn from one another? And it's also really great when I can like batch like-minded customers together to really kind of draw on their experiences and really share those best practices with one another. And I think those are really magical. So that's another thing that just like, as you're thinking holistically about your customer experience, like don't be afraid to let your customers talk to one another, because really beautiful things happen. And more often than not, when I make those introductions between my customers, they come back to me and they're like, oh my gosh, I learned so much. And they're so fired up about learning something. And sometimes that leads to them either being more sticky at renewal or expanding their growth with Zendesk because they've learned from one another. So that's, I know I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent.
No, that's okay. It was good. It was good. I am familiar with Zendesk for startups, and we've had a few clients from there. So it's a great
program. We love having you as a partner in the startup workspace.
Yeah, all good things for sure. Question, that'd be my final question. And this one is going to be more so because one of the groups that I want to speak to are the people who are aspiring to sit in a seat like yours. So if someone is saying, hey, this is the role that I do today, but realistically in 2 years, 5 years, whatever that time frame is, I would love to do the same job that Ash is doing or something like it. What advice would you give to that person so that they could be like you?
Yeah, it's actually funny you asked me this. Someone else from our event that we met at in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
I actually just chatted with her just before I logged on, and she was asking me like, how do you pivot into tech, right? And so for me, it was really so important. Just first of all, kind of getting into like the technical space. If your company by nature isn't already like tech, I would say look at the work that your company does. So whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're in retail, whether you're in manufacturing, right? Like look at like what are the softwares that you use and like pivot in to break into that organization because you already have a lot of expertise on how to use the product. And secondly, like look at the solutions that are designed for your industry. Like even if you're not using that tool, like you already know how to talk the language. You can learn the software, you can learn all the technical stuff, but really like learn you if you can talk the industry, that's such a valuable asset. So like that are such good tips for success. And I'd say if you're already then in that support role and you're looking to move into customer success management, always think, this was really great advice that Kevin Leonore gave me. He wrote, I can't remember if it was actually he wrote this article or Miranda I can never say her last name, Diezenkonski. She's the CCO at Our Work and used to be at Swiftly. But one of them, maybe they both actually wrote articles on this on LinkedIn about like moving from customer support to customer success. But in both of my conversations with both of them, they're such smart people in the success space. Mm-hmm. I think it was Kevin specifically who really encouraged me to stop thinking like a support agent and really think much more holistically as a like success manager, right? If you can make that move away from like, what is the tactical issue that I'm solving in front of me and really start to think like, what is the why behind the customer? What is the customer's larger goal, right? So much in customer success management, like when I first start working with a customer, it's important for me to understand their goals. Like, why did they buy Zendesk in the first place? What are they trying to accomplish? What are the gains and the pains that the gains that they're looking to gain, the pains that they're looking to solve or already getting and already solving? And then how do we operationalize that into tasks, right? So that support background was still really helpful for me because I was able to like still, I can still walk you through how to do the task, but I have to think much more holistically about what is your larger business objective here. So for aspiring support agents who are looking to move into success, just really think about like, what is that why? Be curious, think beyond the issue. If you can look for patterns and like see where things are going, do that. And also like, I think such an underrated tip is like, network and talk to people who are already in the role. And I think this is so applicable for wherever you want to go. Like if you're in support and you're looking to move into leadership, if you're in support and you're looking to move to success, if you're in support and you're looking to move to user experience design, like wherever you are in support, I think support is so special because it's such an incubator at a lot of companies for growing your career and really kind of developing as a thinker and building affinity for the product, but just like network with the people who are in the role that you want to be in, whether that's already internally. I think it's actually a little bit easier to do this internally at your company because it's so easy to reach out to people on like Slack and Teams and, reach out to people. But even on LinkedIn, I think that's such an underrated thing, just to like reach out to people who are in the role that you're doing. I know for me, when I was looking to first break into the tech space, like I would reach out to people on LinkedIn and, there are going to be people who are just going to be like, they're not going to talk to you. Right. But it's really just a numbers game, right? You have to put yourself out there. It's like a funnel, right? We talk about funnels a lot sometimes in customer experience, particularly in e-com or like sales motions, right? But networking and also job searching is so much like a funnel. Like you're going to get so many rejections, but it all really comes down to such a numbers game of, you sow enough seeds and enough of them will bloom into flowers. So, it's terrifying to put yourself out there. But that's, I would say at a really high level, that's a lot of my advice for how to kind of break into support or meaningfully, kind of grow your career if you're in support and meaningfully grow your career into another avenue. And that's also like, I think such an underrated tip too. I haven't been as good about practicing that yet at Zendesk because I'm also where I want to be. But when I was at Classy, right, like, that moving internally, I think especially at startups, that's like such an underrated trick to
Yeah.
really like, just own your career too. You have to want your success more than anybody else and really mobilize and empower kind of the way in which you put yourself out there to manifest what you want. I know that manifest bit sounds a little like,
No, I love it.
but
I love it. There's strength in it. Like you have to visualize it, right?
yeah.
You do. You do. This was so lovely. Like I'm so glad that we met. You just walked up. You were like, "Hi," and I was like, "Hey," because I'm naturally an introvert. Like I do well right now because I'm behind. I'm in my office and it's just me and it's a camera. So I'm like, I'm all good. But in a social setting, I'm kind of like, So thank you for coming to say hello because look what came out of it.
Look what came out of it. And now we get to just like both vibe in our beautiful home offices too.
Just saying, right? This was amazing. I will be sure to link to your LinkedIn profile below. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to chat, to get to know you better, to share your expertise, your background with our audience, and for people to learn more about how Zendesk can solve some of their customer experience conundrums. So,
Customer experience conundrums. Wow, that's a mouthful. Yeah, definitely. I encourage anyone who's watching, if you want to shoot me a note on LinkedIn, say the CX Collective and Ty's podcast sent you.
Yeah.
Definitely. I always love connecting with folks on LinkedIn who are either interested about how to break into tech, how to meaningfully kind of navigate your career in the support and success space, or if you ever just want to just chat customer experience. I always love a good virtual coffee chat, or if you're in, Southern California, a real life coffee chat too.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. This was lovely. And I don't know, in the future, I'm seeing something with me, you, and Jessica Rose. I don't know. I'm calling it into existence. You see the waves? All right. This was wonderful.
Panel-based podcast. Get a few people on a panel. We'll have a
do it. Yeah. Done and done. Yeah. All right. Thank you again. I'll talk to you the next time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.